Welcome to Canucks. My name is Rev Trev, and I'm so excited because today I am starting a new series about top 10s. We're going to be doing top 10 forwards, top 10 goalies, top 10 defense. If we have enough time, we're doing top 10 enforcers. That will be a fun one as well. But, oh man, I was so excited because, this is the off season. There's not a lot to talk about. Let's get into something fun. Now, listen, before we start any list, I just want you to know I would love to hear from you. Put your top 10 list in the comment section for the goalies. I would love to read your comments. And of course, it's just subjective. I mean, there are some facts that are going to go through it together, but please do that. And while you're doing that, since you're watching, since you're going to post a comment, why don't you do the Rev Trev hat trick and hit that subscribe button? I'd really appreciate the support. I'm trying to make passionate, realistic, and honest Canucks content. Okay, so here's the thing about Canucks goalies. I thought, okay, this is going to be pretty easy. It was way more work and way more difficult than I anticipated. So I really hope that you enjoy this video because, if you think about it, there are so many goalies that played so little games for Vancouver. There's been a Canucks goaltender carousel that's been going on. So, think about names like Corey Hirsch or Gar Snow or Eddie Lack or Kay Whitmore, Felix Potvin, Troy Gamble, Steve Weeks. Did you know that Arturs Urbe, do you remember that he played for us? Bob Asenza, goalie Bob. There's so many. Curtis Sanford. There's so many people. Andrew Raycroft. Are you kidding me? Sean Burke only played 16 games for us, but that so many people played 70. Hey, Spencer Martin, guess how many games he's played for Vancouver? 35 already. That's crazy, but hardly any people, not very many people played over 100 for Vancouver, and so it's made this very, very challenging. So let's, without further ado, get into my top 10 list. And I'm telling you right now, 10 to 6 might shock you. So let's just dive in. Number 10, Mr. John Garrett. Now, some of you are saying, Trevor, how can you put John Garrett in the top 10 goalies list? Because he had the 13th worst goals against average in Canucks history. And so he was averaging 4.12 goals a game that he had let in. He only played 56 games in Vancouver. He had only had 22 wins and 21 losses. So, of course, putting John in here is all about, not only did he play goaltender for us, but he was our color commentator for so many years. John Garrett retired in 85-86, and he got offered a position on the Vancouver Canucks to be the assistant general manager to Harry Neale. Harry Neale ended up getting fired, so that offer was relinquished, and so John didn't end up becoming our assistant general manager. John began his broadcasting career in 86, 87, and he worked as a color commentator for Hockey Night in Canada. And within a few years, he was considered a valuable member, and he was assigned his very first conference final in 1991. And then he did 8 of those in a row. So, that's impressive, right? And then since 2002-2003 season, John became our beloved Canucks color commentator, and he was on Sportsnet, and he partnered first with Jim Houston, and then later on with where the magic and the chemistry happened with John Shorthouse. And a lot of us have just appreciated John's color commentary, his friendliness, his smile, talking about the game, being positive about Vancouver, and so that was awesome, and we just really enjoyed him in that role. So on March 23rd, 2023, John announced his retirement from the Canucks regional broadcast and concluded this season, and we've really appreciated him. So that's why he's my number 10. You can pick whoever you want for number 10, but that's why John Garrett is my number 10. At number 9, I'm going to go with someone who you may have not heard about before, Gary Smith. Now, he was born in 1944, and he played with the Canucks in years 1973, 74, 75, 76. And he played 188 games for Vancouver, which was 6th all time in our team's history. He was 7th with Canuck wins with 72 wins. So, I mean, he's had some success here, right? He played for so many teams that he was nicknamed Gary Suitcase Smith. But he's also not only known, excuse me, for being a goaltender, but and saving the puck, but getting into fights. In fact, in 1973, he jumped off the bench to get in a big brawl versus the feared, ferocious Broad Street Bullies of the Philadelphia Flyers. So now, the Canucks made the playoffs for the first time in 1975, and Gary Smith was our goaltender, and he was one of the main reasons why. In fact, one of his best years that he had, which I believe was 1975, he actually had a groin injury, and he didn't think he played as well as everyone else did. So that was super interesting. But I'm going to post in the description a video of when the Montreal Canadiens played the Vancouver Canucks, and it was Gary Smith versus Ken Dryden. And I'm telling you right now, if you watch the highlights, I think Gary Smith outplayed Ken Dryden, and that's why he's my number 9 all-time Canuck goalie. All right, at number 8, one of my favorites on the Vancouver Canucks right now is Thatcher Demko. If you ask me who's your favorite player, I'm not really sure on the Canucks right now, but he's got to be it's either Demko or he's number 2 as my favorite on the Canucks roster right now. So here's the thing. He's played in 168 games already, and he's already accumulated 81 wins, which is already 6th all time. Wow, that's crazy. So now here's the thing. The memories of Bubble Demko. That was so awesome when they played that in that bubble series, and Vancouver played so well, may end up making the playoffs, and when he got put in, he was just unbelievable. He was so incredible that he had his first 60 minutes of playoff hockey, he had 42 saves. They won that game. The next game they played, he had 48 saves, and it was a shutout. I mean, he was on fire, and both of those were elimination games, forced it to Game 7. We know that the Vegas Golden Knights won. But then 2021, Demko was lights out, and he was so good that when it came to the decision of which goalie to keep and move on with, they let Markstrom go for nothing, and they kept Thatcher Demko. So I'm personally looking forward to the future, to how many more wins, playoffs that we're going to make, and just that he's a difference maker. And so I'm super pumped to say that he's my number 8, and he's obviously going to be rising up this list really fast. All right, number 7 might surprise you. You might get a little triggered and angry, but it's Ryan Miller. Yes, I said Ryan Miller. You and I are both shocked that Ryan Miller is 7th. In fact, this graphic right here even has him putting up his 7 fingers. I think it's 7. Maybe he did 8. I don't know. I'll have to check that graphic out again. But did you know that Ryan Miller played 150 games for the Canucks? Now, we understand that he played on a very bad team, but his goals against average is 4th in Canucks history. How in the world did he do that? Now, he only had 64 wins with 68 losses, but he also had 10 shutouts. So I thought, I'm going to put him there, and I know Thatcher Demko is going to be passing him this season. Now, number 6 is Dan Cloutier. Again, you might be saying, say what? Dan Cloutier is 4th all time for Canuck wins. Dan played in the West Coast Express era, and he was a very good team offensively and even defensively. I mean, with Jovo and Sami Salo and all those guys. I mean, it was a lot of fun to watch that team. He had an impressive 208 games played with 109 wins, but only 68 losses. So they, as you know, they just won a lot. Kluche was famous though for allowing terrible goals in, and that's why I had him at 4th and I've dropped him to 6th, and I know Demko's after this season is going to leapfrog him as well in my rankings. But in fact, many referred to Kluche as Dan Beachball Kluche. So awkward that would be your nickname, because he left such gaping holes for the opponents to score on. But I still think he played a lot of good minutes for us, and he did a lot of good things, so I've got him at number 6. All right, we're going to the top 5 here, and number 5 might surprise you as well. Corey Schneider. Listen, there was no better time to be a Canucks fan with this tandem in the way of, man, Corey Schneider, Roberto Luongo, playing so many awesome minutes with that incredible team. And so, listen, a great problem to have in Vancouver, to have 2 great goaltenders, and literally people saying you have 2 number 1 goalies on the team. The problem is we messed it up so bad that we lost them both. I mean, that just kind of speaks to our franchise for a moment, doesn't it? Now, here's the hard facts about Corey and how good he was. He played 98 games with us, but he was number 1 in save percentage with a .927 save percentage. Also, he had a whopping 55 wins and only had 26 losses. Plus, he had 9 shutouts. I'm telling you, he played so awesome. He was a fan favorite for sure. Now, we know that Corey Schneider got traded to New Jersey for their first overall pick, which was number 9, and that ended up being our captain, Bo Horvat. And so Bo, as you know, played many, many great years for us before getting traded to the Islanders. So that is my number 5. All right, number 4 is Jacob Markstrom. He played 7 seasons for Vancouver, came over in the Luongo trade with Florida. Markstrom is the fourth in games played. He's 5th in Canucks save percentage, and he's had 99 wins with Vancouver. He's the 6'6", 205-pound monster, and he was a rock in our net for. I remember when the fans were so upset when we traded Luongo and felt like we didn't get a lot in return. And it took us a little while to figure out, but we got a real gem in Markstrom. He was absolutely amazing. In fact, Bubble Demko, it was Markstrom that had led us, had gotten back from injury and led us into the playoffs there, into the bubble. And if it wasn't for his injury, Demko would have never started there. And so here's the thing. So if it wasn't for contract issues, if it wasn't for his injury and this incredible goaltender was sitting behind him, he would still be a Vancouver Canuck today. Now, he's gifted, he's fun to watch, and that's why he made my top 4. Now, in Vancouver, let's be honest, the top 3 are pretty obvious when you start looking at the stats and remember back to the good old days. But what order are they in? Well, number 3 is Richard Brodeur, and his nickname is King Richard. And then one of the reasons why he is 3rd is because he's 3rd in games played, he's 3rd in wins, and he's 3rd in shots, saves that he's made in our franchise. He was absolutely stellar for us and instrumental in leading the Canucks to the playoffs in 1982. We made it all the way. We kept upsetting teams in 1982 with Tony Tanti and all those incredible players back in those days, overachieving. And King Richard was one of the reasons why we made it all the way to the finals. Now, we know the story goes on to we faced one of the greatest NHL dynasties in the history of the NHL. And that was the New York Islanders. We end up getting swept by them. I mean, listen, they had Dennis Potvin, they had Brian Trottier, they had Mike Bossy, and so like that, obviously we weren't going to win that series, but it was such a huge thing to make it. So King Richard, up until that point, was the best Canucks goalie that we'd ever had, and had kept that title for a very long time. So he is my number 3. All right, so top 2, And number 2 is Kirk McLean. Kirk McLean led the Vancouver Canucks in most games ever played for our franchise with 514. And he has led the Canucks in most saves, most points, even as a goalie with 21. Luongo was next highest with only 10. I mean, the reason why he didn't come in first place is because he also led our team with most losses. And so let's talk for a moment about the 1994 Stanley Cup playoffs. We were playing a stacked Calgary Flames team, and we were down 3-1, and Kirk McLean did enough to shut the door, and Jeff Courtnall scores in Game 5 in overtime so that we continued. Then in Game 6, Kirk McLean, again, another incredible performance, and Trevor Linden scores the winner in that game as well, pushes us to Game 7, and Game 7 was phenomenal. Greg Adams squeaks in a goal for us to tie it up. It pushes us into overtime, and then it sets up what they consider the save. Oh my goodness, it was a 3-on-1 in overtime, of course. Thurin Fleury passes across ice to Robert Reichel, and somehow, I still to this day don't know how Kirk McLean get across, and Kick saved it. Oh, the place was going nuts. And guess what? Don Cherry in the intermission said, you're going to watch hockey for the next 100 years and you're not going to see a better save than that. And man, as Canucks fan, we can agree that was the greatest save in our franchise history. Not only did we end up beating them because Pavel Bure scored in overtime, we were able to keep winning, and we got to the Stanley Cup Finals and took the New York Rangers with, again, the stacked New York Rangers to Game 7. We ended up losing 3-2 to them, but Kurt stopped 32 of 35 shots. What an effort. I thought for sure we were going to win. Trevor Linden hit the post. I mean, there's so much to talk about that Stanley Cup run, but Kirk McLean is my number 2 goalie. All right, so that leaves us to the number 1, and it's no surprise that it's Roberto Luongo. To me, he is the greatest Canucks goaltender that we've ever had, and it's not really that close. He was by far our most talented goalie that we've ever had, and he had incredible wins and losses ratio. He had the most Canuck shutouts with 38. The second best was Kirk McLean with only 20. That's how much better Luongo was. His save percentage was second best behind Corey Schneider, which Luongo ended up having a .919 save percentage for his time with the Canucks. He was the only goalie to be named captain of his team. In the 2006-2007 season, coming over from Florida to Vancouver, Luongo was nominated for 3 awards: the Vezina Trophy, the Lester B. Pearson Award, and the Hart Trophy. Now, he didn't win any one of those awards, but to even be nominated for all 3 was absolutely impressive. He was one of the best goalies of his era, and we know in 2010, 2011, that season was magical. We had the right team, we had the right goalie, and we went through the playoffs, went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, and of course, Luongo was a big reason for that. Now, we know that we end up losing to the Boston Bruins in Game 7, in 7 games, but listen, what people forget about is that Luongo had 2 shutouts against those championship Boston Bruins. And in fact, I think the only reason we end up losing that is because of the significant injuries that we couldn't overcome. We only had to win 1 of 2 games, and we just couldn't do it. So we give credit to the Bruins, but listen, it wasn't Luongo's fault that we lost Game 7. A team if you can't win, if you can't score, okay? That's just a fact. Roberto Luongo gave it his all. And I believe that Luongo should be in the Hall of Fame one day. So he deserves it. He's been good enough, and that's why he's my number 1 goalie. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, please post in the comments what your top 10 is. I'd love to hear it. And please hit that subscribe button as I'm doing top 10 lists, and you don't want to miss any of them. Thanks so much for watching, and go Canucks, go.